Well, good morning. What a wonderful speech by the Lieutenant Governor. We are so fortunate that she was able to join us this morning. And kind of continuing on the same track as what she talked about in her speech, I am honored to present the update panel for the Energy and Environment Cabinet this morning. And to keep things rolling, we're going to start with Ms. Kenya Stump, who is the Executive Director for the Office of Energy Policy. So Kenya, I know we heard the Lieutenant Governor talk about all these things that are happening on the federal level and the state level, but share with us more about what you're seeing in your office.
I think for our office, we're continuing to remain focused on our core focus areas, and that's energy affordability, energy security, energy education, and energy economic development. For us, that really means how do we make the best use of the federal funding, and how do we secure federal funding to support projects throughout the Commonwealth. A good example, grid resilience is a very important topic given how many natural disasters we've faced in our communities and across our electric utilities. We have some exciting programs through our grid resilience program for our first ever municipal electric systems receiving federal assistance to do grid projects. Those are Hopkinsville, Owensboro, Princeton, and Williamstown. They're putting our federal dollars to work to improve the quality of lives for those citizens that they serve. Everything from Owensboro has a new transmission tower going up across the river. We have advanced metering in Princeton and Hopkinsville. Williamstown is doing a lot of pole replacement and undergrounding. So these are great projects that really bring reliable service to those citizens. And these communities were selected because they have shown a high risk to hazards or they have experienced natural disasters that have really affected their distribution system. What this program is showing us is really the need to support our smaller distribution systems and improving their electric system serving the customers. The other part of that is our state parks. We're using the same funding. In Kentucky, our state parks own some of their electric distribution system. We're increasingly relying on our state parks for sheltering and emergency services. So it's important that we have a high degree of reliability and electric service within our parks. This is a first ever partnership between energy, parks, and the electric cooperatives to really figure out a process of how we work to improve the safety and reliability of the services to those citizens that are in need of parks, but then also to tourists who are coming to our parks, very important for our economic development. I think the other thing is community resilience. Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grant is some federal funding we've received. We're funding projects in Murray, Wolfe County, and there is a third. And those are some great, what we call local government, boots on the ground energy efficiency projects where we're really doing lighting improvements, windows, some are solar projects in those government buildings. And what that does is it saves money for the local government, and that means better services for the citizens that they serve. So the cheapest electricity is the electricity that you don't use. And oh, look at that.
Prime example, right?
Okay, I don't know what's happening. We might have to put some funding here at the hotel. So we're excited about our community resilience projects as well. The other great thing is we're still working on hydrogen. We have some exciting developments with the University of Kentucky where we're making some bourbon with some hydrogen. So if you ever want to get hydrogen in the mainstream, you've got to just attach it to bourbon and then it'll take off. So we have a great partnership with UK, and that's really built on our state energy program funding, and that's why it's so important that we secure that funding and that we maintain that funding for our work in both energy economic development, but also with our state energy emergency response program. I think the other thing the Lieutenant Governor mentioned is nuclear. For those of you in the audience, we are an all of the above fuel state, but now I say we're all of the above and then some, based on where we are today. And for Kentucky to truly be all of the above, we really have to walk the walk, and that means we have to take a serious look at adding nuclear energy generation to the state. But nuclear energy power generation is not our only opportunity. Giving our logistics advantage, giving our manufacturing base here, we have a huge opportunity from fuel production to advanced manufacturing to support both the existing nuclear fleet as well as new advanced nuclear projects. It's also important for our Department of Defense work here in Kentucky. Nuclear is becoming an increasingly important part of our defense operations, and advancements in that are important to Kentucky as well. I think for nuclear, we're very excited to partner with SOAR in Eastern Kentucky. We're hiring Eastern Kentuckians into good paying jobs with a company called Framatome that supports nuclear energy projects across the nation. And then we're very fortunate if you out in the lobby, stop by GLE. Global Laser Enrichment is here today, and Nima, I don't know where you are, raise your hand. Nima is here. Nima represents Global Laser Enrichment. They are the first to announce nuclear fuel enrichment activities in Paducah. I believe that you said, Nima, 60 to 80 megawatts of load going to Big Rivers Electric and some high-paying quality jobs in Paducah, Kentucky. They are the first, but not the only project in Paducah. We also have General Matters announcement there as well, and Paducah was also selected for AI infrastructure deployment at the Paducah Gaseous Diffusion Plant. So all that said, we're very active in nuclear, but we're also active in hydrogen, we're active in solar, we're active in wind, we're active in hydro. Super excited that we're gonna also hear from the Lewis Ridge pumped hydro project today, the first ever long-term energy storage project in the state, and so beneficial that that's 280 megawatts of storage to help with our grid resilience. So we're truly in Kentucky, we're an energy hub and we're walking the walk. We're doing projects across our communities, across our grid infrastructure, and we have strong working relationships with our utilities to help kind of tackle some of the challenges that we're facing with increasing natural disasters, but also the complexities with our markets, what's going on with load and supply, and how we're going to meet demands in the future. But I think the one thing that I'm very proud of, and with Secretary Goodman and the cabinet, is that we always have open lines of communication, and we're willing to have conversations. We're willing to tackle the tough questions. We're willing to sit down and create partnerships to help solve these complex problems in unique ways. And I think that's what we're most proud of in the Energy Office, is just our transparency, our data products to help inform so that we can have productive conversations around these complex issues. And then also the fact that it's really a collaborative work environment.
Yep. Well, thank you, Kenya, for that update. And it sounds very positive, and I've had the pleasure of working with you on many projects, so I can tell you that you're a wealth of knowledge when it comes to what's going on in Kentucky. And it kind of ties into something I wanted to ask you, Angie. So Angie is the chair for the Public Service Commission. So we're hearing about all these benefits that Kenya's talking about, but on the other hand, you turn on the news and the media's going, it's the energy crisis, and AI is gonna ruin us all, right? So, or be the savior of us all, depending on your viewpoint. So what are you seeing as your role as chair at the Public Service Commission as far as what's happening with our utilities and forecasting load growth and what we're seeing on your forefront?
Right, so yes, great to be here this morning, even though I have to follow Kenya, which is the worst, because she knows everything. But I learn something every single time I have any contact with Kenya, and I'm glad to be here with you guys this morning. I am chair of the Kentucky Public Service Commission. We regulate 1,100 utilities in the state, including electric, gas, water, and sewer. And our job is to find the balance between affordable rates, reasonable, fair, just, and reasonable rates, and then making sure that the utilities have enough revenue to keep running and to be efficient. And it's a balance that we work on every day. I see some of my incredible staff are here today, and I never miss an opportunity to brag on them because they really are amazing professionals that I get to work with every day. But as far as updates, since last year, I do want to talk about the load forecast, a few little things. Senate Joint Resolution 140 last year directed the Public Service Commission to get ourselves ready to regulate nuclear energy, to learn, to study, to examine our regs to see if anything needs to be changed, and to look at other states. So we've joined the NARUC-NACIO partnership for first mover states. We've toured nuclear plants in North Carolina and Oak Ridge, Tennessee. We have made a couple of trips to Paducah to check out everything that's going on at the DOE site there with the laser enrichment of spent nuclear fuel cells. We have made plans to host a conference in the spring, a technical conference, where we're inviting stakeholders to come and talk about nuclear. We're doing a 5-city tour across the state to hear people's thoughts about nuclear. So we're taking our responsibilities seriously when it comes to preparing to regulate nuclear. There was another Senate Joint Resolution 175 that directed us to remove all barriers to any impediment to the quick rollout of broadband. And so our role, since we don't regulate telecom, is that we do regulate those who own the poles. And so we held a series of talks with stakeholders regarding pole attachments and how we might roll that out more quickly. And I think we've had some success. The backlog has diminished some from that. And then also there was a fairly new law that required primacy for local governments when it comes to solar energy and solar siting. So Deputy Secretary Lyons and I serve on the Kentucky State Siting Board, and we have public hearings across the state and get to hear what people think about that when a solar site is potentially locating in their counties. And it has been quite controversial at times, but the legislature has given each of the 120 counties the right to have primacy over the state statutes when it comes to what sort of solar sites they want in their county. So we're still navigating that. And then the final area I wanted to talk about is what you just asked me about, which was how do we forecast load and how do we be prepared. Our utilities are required, when they're given a monopoly territory, to serve everyone who wants to take service in that area. So if a data center wants to come to their area, they have to be prepared to serve. And it takes a lot of electricity to serve a data center, a cryptocurrency mine, things like that. And so for 20 years or so, load growth was steady, about 1% growth a year. As far as residential growth, it's still steady. There's even a couple of areas like Eastern Kentucky where they aren't seeing growth at all. But when you start looking at having a data center come to your territory, it is a lot quicker to build a data center than it is to build generation. And so our utilities are really facing a crisis when it comes to having an effective load forecast and making sure that they're ready to serve one of these huge entities. So at least 4 of our utilities have filed EHLF tariffs, which is extremely high load factor tariffs, to find the right balance, because the legislature has indicated we are interested in having data centers here, tax incentives and other impetus to locate here, and we don't want to miss economic development opportunities. But at the same time, there aren't many jobs associated with data centers, and if we're going to locate one here, we need to make sure that ratepayers aren't stuck paying the full cost of one of these centers that for whatever reason doesn't stay. So if we're going to build generation to suit them. So we're looking at a lot of different things. The 4 tariffs that we're looking at are pretty different from one another, but tailored toward the unique ratepayers and constituents in those areas, because each utility has very different demographics. So we're gonna see which one works, but the PSC's role is to make sure that whatever locates here, the ratepayers aren't tasked with paying for load and costs that they didn't cause. So it's evolving every day, but we're hopefully ready for that.
It definitely sounds like you have your hands full, but I know they're in good, capable hands.
Yeah,
so.
and all of our major utilities have all filed rate cases all at the same time right now, so thanks.
Yeah. Well, transitioning down the stage, I'd like to go next to Commissioner Hatton. Commissioner Hatton, I know you have the pleasure of overseeing the air, water, and waste management divisions within the department. And I know that there's always things happening in that department. But I know one big thing that has been coming up of late is succession planning and looking to the future and creating an opportunity that staff can go to those more seasoned employees and learn more about how we do the things and how we regulate. I know there's always PFAS that we're talking about and some other regulatory changes. So if you don't mind, please share with us your update on what's been happening over the last year.
All right, thanks, Kari. It's good to see everybody here today, some familiar faces and opportunities to meet some others. I remember, and John, I'm sure you remember, former Commissioner Bob Logan, who used to say, you either plan or you get planned for, and which is a true statement. Because by necessity that'll happen, but I've never really been shy about saying I have a significant passion for seeing young people, maybe not just young in years, but maybe young in experience, come into the agency and sort of learn what we do and why we do it and the importance of what we do and see them begin to hit their stride. Everybody knows that as time goes on, you have significant amounts of experience that retire or leave, decades worth of experience. So one of the challenges, and I believe one of the things that's important for all the leadership in the department, is to recognize the absolute necessity to meld together youth and experience. It's maybe a little bit more of a challenge than it was a few years ago. It's not so much of the water cooler conversations as you used to see all the time. And with significant advances in technology, which are to everyone's benefit, technology can certainly be a tool and has to be a tool that's used to solve problems, but it has to be informed by experience and understanding. So we spend a fair amount of time and resources in the Commissioner's office through our knowledge management and e-learning program. It's been successful. I think it could be more successful, and I should have pulled my tie a little tighter. But that's very important because at some point in time, well, it happens all the time. There's a handoff that happens every couple of years. And, for those of us that have been in the agency a while, when our time comes to leave, I think it's pretty important we feel like it's left in good hands and hands that we did everything we could to make sure that was the case. You mentioned PFAS. Well, before I mention PFAS, I do want to mention regionalization of drinking water systems, which has been a focus of Secretary Goodman since she became Secretary of the Cabinet. I think since 2020, in 2020, I think we had 900 drinking water systems, and now we're in a little over 425 or something like that. So, drinking water systems, in order for them to be as successful as they can be, they have to have operational, managerial, and financial controls in place. And depending on the water system, that's either something that's fairly obtainable or it's not, depending on the resources that you have, the number of ratepayers, where you're located. Regionalization is something that allows drinking water systems to come together collectively, where they can then capitalize on operational, managerial, and financial. And there are many places in which it can happen. There may be a few around where it's just not physically or geographically possible, but we continue to make progress in that regard, and we appreciate Secretary Goodman's guidance on that, because I personally knew very little about it, but I do see the benefits of it. And I've also noticed in the last year or so, just generally speaking, there's a lot more interest in water issues in general, so for good reason. Now, back to PFAS, it does have a little bit to do with water. The thought is that maybe things have, quote, calmed down a little bit. I don't know if that's the case, but we've been talking about it for a while. there were some questions about whether or not the Trump administration would dial back on some of the PFAS requirements. And they have in some cases, particularly with drinking water. But it appears as though they're going to maintain the two primary PFAS compounds that we see in all of our sampling as part of our strategy. So the reality of it is PFOA and PFOS still seem to be those constituents that show up most often, and therefore notify you if you have a problem and probably drive any potential risk as a result of that. Our strategy still continues to be the same as it was from day one. We knew when this became more of a mainstream conversation that we didn't feel like, I mean, we know regulation's important, but we knew regulations wouldn't immediately fix an issue. And so we really concentrated on building some infrastructure where we could look across the Commonwealth and see what our citizens are actually potentially being exposed to. That's 5-6 years down the road now. We've accumulated a lot of data, and a lot of that data is going to be used by, thankfully, less than 10% of our drinking water systems that are going to have to take some effort by 2029, maybe 2031, to reach the drinking water standard in their water facilities. I can't tell you how much I appreciate all of our staff in the department for all the work that we've done, because we've really sort of stepped in and been the eyes and ears and established a database by which we can make decisions. You know, the drinking water issue is a solvable problem. It's a solvable problem if there's technology and money. The other aspect of PFAS that's not maybe quite so solvable is what happens when you have a release into groundwater. And what's the future of that? And you think about things like future exposures and those types of things. So that's a huge, that's a big population, no matter where you're at in the world, because PFAS was used so broadly in so many types of activities. But we are continue to work on a real logical approach when the time comes for a cleanup approach that requires emphasis on source removal. We've done quite a bit of research on how PFAS acts in groundwater. We've read what other folks have done. We've done some of our own. It's a really significant challenge once it gets sort of, the horse gets out of the barn. So the main thing we're trying to do right now is look at areas of the state where we might have problems and what are the potential exposures. That's what you have to do in a situation like this when you have a really long-term unsolvable problem, is find out is there actual impacts going on or likely to. So we continue to spend a fair amount of time on that. What else did we talk about, Kari?
I'd like to go back to maybe what you were talking about with the regionalization, and maybe give a little kudos to Secretary Goodman under her leadership, as well as yours. You know, I had the fortune of going to a national state conference recently, and it's always nice when you're called out by federal EPA and other states for being the lead in regionalization. So I know we've seen a great trend. I also, when we were talking about the education component and how we're doing that succession planning, we've also been doing a lot as far as the GIS and creating tools for our staff to use. Is there anything that you want to comment on that, or maybe can you, I know your staff does a lot of stuff with GIS and data. Is there anything you want to talk about there?
I don't want to, I think this is an area where Tony's staff and energy and environment really overlap. We're really proud, and I know Tony is too. Kentucky has probably the best GIS staff of any state. I would put us up against any state across the nation. We're really proud in our energy office that our data products are energy information that you can count on to help you make informed decisions. We're not here to tell you what decision to make, but we're here to provide you with the information so that you can have a robust discussion, whether that's in your company, in your community, with your customers. And we do that. We visualize data, whether it be affordability, whether it's our energy infrastructure, whether it's our coal power plants. We've done coal facts and our quarterly coal reports forever, and that's visualized. We visualize almost every kind of energy infrastructure, whether it be petroleum, propane, natural gas, coal, renewables. And that's out there for the public to utilize, because when we have a more energy literate public, we can make more informed decisions, and that can help save homeowners money, and it can help save our bottom line, it can help save in our communities, and that's really the power of GIS, and I think Tony would agree from his water GIS staff.
Well, we've got that, and then I think also that's a good lead-in for Courtney, who's with our Department of Natural Resources, and I'll let Tony think about it. We've also got the CCR stuff that ties into coal and everything else that we might want to talk about a little bit more later. But Courtney, I know recently that there's been some presidential executive orders that have come about emphasizing strengthening the U.S. energy market, especially related to around coal, and renewed interest in that domestic production. Tell us what's been going on with DNR and what you see happening in that department.
Well, thank you for having me here today. Kentucky's Title V program is in a state of real transition. Over the last 20 years, production in Kentucky has declined by 80%. We find ourselves in our Title V program currently managing the fewest number of permits in the history of our program. Just 64 permits in this state are actively producing coal. Taking those numbers, it would appear that we're looking at an industry in decline. Recent executive orders on domestic production, I think there was a recent announcement of a $625 million investment to spur domestic production. In addition, with those executive orders, create a lot of uncertainty for regulatory entities like the Department for Natural Resources. Also compounding that at the federal level, we receive most of our 50% of our operating from the Federal Administration and Enforcement Grant. We recently found out that our request for that grant, the monies that we are getting to operate these programs, is considerably less than what we requested. In addition, it makes it hard for us to meet our inspection, enforcement, and permitting mandates. And then just one more challenge on top of reduced federal funding and increases in potential production, we had a wave of bankruptcies that impacted over 40% of our inspectable units just in the last few years. Those bankruptcies stalled reclamation at one point, created very non-compliant conditions for some of our permits. But this cabinet took a proactive step and entered into surety reclamation agreements. And through those agreements over the last several years, we've ensured that 150 permits will be reclaimed. We've reclaimed 42,000 feet of high wall, that's 8 miles, quick conversion for you. Vegetated over 2,500 acres of land formerly mined, and we reclaimed 500 sediment ponds. Just so you know, it takes about $60,000 to reclaim one pond, so it's quite an expensive venture. And all of this requires more staffing because you have more non-compliant permits and there's more to do. So while we navigate reduced federal funding, the potential increase in production, I think the department, through its initiatives, has really put us in a place that as all this comes together, we're going to be ready to continue our mandates, provide excellent customer service for the coal industry and the citizens that we oversee. We are busy. Our staff is very busy.
Well, it's always good when we hear that things are moving in the right direction.
Absolutely.
So, I know y'all have also had another hurdle that you've been working through, and that is the Senate Bill 89 that passed last year. And tell me a little bit about, or tell the audience, please, a little bit about how that has affected Kentucky's SMACRA permit and the program that you guys oversee.
Honestly, not much. At 405 KR, those are our underlying regulations. In chapters 16 and 18, there's a requirement that even in the absence of a KPDS permit, all discharges from disturbed areas on a SMACRA permitted site are required to meet federal effluent water quality standards established in 40 CFR Part 434. So very simply put, if you're on a coal mine site, you still have to meet water quality standards, period. And in order to explain this to our regulated community, the DNR is working on a reclamation advisory memorandum. It's RAM 172. And what that RAM will do is provide explanation to our stakeholders on how we're going to implement the changes enacted in Senate Bill 89. Now, on the long-term treatment side of the House, there were some substantial changes. It changed how we calculate those long-term treatment bonds, including removal of the economic factor, the economic model, the 75 factor, and it also established a definition for what constitutes long-term treatment. Regardless of all those changes, we are required through our regulations to calculate a bond sufficient to ensure reclamation, which includes water mitigation, and we continue to do that. Just a note, when changes happen at the state level in our federal programs, we are required to submit a program amendment to our Federal Office of Surface Mining. We have done that. It's Kentucky 267, and while we await approval to implement those changes in Senate Bill 89, we continue to enact our current regulatory framework.
And I know there's a lot of overlap. So like we've talked today about what Kenya does and how it overlaps with things that happen at the Public Service Commission. And it sounds like even with what's going on in Senate Bill 89, even if I know this overlaps with what Commissioner Hatton's team does in Division of Water, even if there's not a KPDS permit affiliated with that SMACRA operation, there's still a tie-in with those water quality standards.
Exactly. So as I said, so if there is a disturbed area and there's going to be a discharge from that disturbed area, our inspection staff ensure that that discharge meets federal water quality.
So Commissioner Hatton, I know if there's anything you want to comment on about Senate Bill 89, but also I know we are looking at the CCR stuff in-house. Is there anything you'd like to share with us about that and what's going on there?
Well, I would say post-Senate Bill 89 passage, I think it's become, for those who are interested or perhaps affected, I think there's more and more folks see the wisdom. If you have a KPDS permit, you ought to keep your KPDS permit because it has some ability of permit shield. Also, there are other rules that could come to bear in the absence of a KPDS permit. That's just facts. So I don't think we've seen, I would certainly agree the bill certainly was lacking, in my opinion. We haven't seen a significant impact, at least in how we would measure the number of permits that we receive or modifications we receive where someone is asking for a KPDS permit to be removed. It's less than 3, so that means it's either 1 or 2. So also on the CCR stuff, and I'll be real quick on this because it may not feel as though it's something that many people in here are interested in, but you and your children, your grandchildren will be interested in it every time you pay your energy bill. Coal combustion residuals in 2015, the federal EPA came out with a rulemaking that ultimately brought an end to wet sluicing and management of CCR and surface impoundments. It is what it is, and we've been moving forward since then. I think it'd be safe to say that in the intervening years, there's been some reimagining or reinterpreting of that 2015 rule. We've seen a situation where Kentucky ratepayers have paid significant amounts of money for these utilities to implement one of the remedies that was available to them under the 2015 rulemaking. Recently, in the last 2 years, there has been some new thoughts on that issue from the federal level that perhaps there needs to be a more prescriptive approach where CCR surface impoundments are going to have to be removed and relocated. And that sounds good, and there may be occasions and situations where that is the right thing to do. But the rulemaking never really required anybody to assess the risk of digging up a pond and moving it somewhere else, because there's certainly risk associated with that too. Not to mention the fact that ratepayers may once again have to pay for a remedy that they've already paid for previously. I'm not saying that in some cases removal of a said pond might not, or surface impoundment might not be the right thing to do. What I'm saying is worst case scenarios, which there are some across the country, none of which I'm aware of in Kentucky, should not be the basis for pre-decisional rulemaking or deciding that all ponds must be removed. There needs to be a process whereby a scientific process, without any pre-decision, where a site can be evaluated to determine whether the risk of removing the pond is not just worth it from a ratepayer standpoint, but from a risk standpoint. That's how EPA typically does all their Superfund style cleanups. I really have always had a hard time understanding why it's not the same with this particular type of waste. EPA has recently asked states to revisit the possibility of us developing our own permit program. And for a while, we said, no, we're not going to do that because we didn't believe in the policy that was behind some of the reimagining. We didn't think it was right for the state, right for the ratepayers, or would improve environmental protection, which is our responsibility, and we won't ever lose sight of that. So we're working on that right now, spending a lot of time on it. We'll see how it unfolds, if it's something that's acceptable. I'm sure there'll be folks that will like it and folks that won't, but I can promise you this, it will be a process that requires a reasonable amount of rigor to determine whether or not you take the risk and the ratepayer impacts from removing a pond when it's really not necessary.
And if you don't mind, for those that are not regulatory in the audience, I know this is not the CCRs in the band, so what does the CCR stand for?
Credence Clearwater Revival. Consumer confidence reports. Or coal combustion residuals.
There we go.
I apologize.
We do it all the time,
I
don't we?
know,
We
I
talk
know.
in another language.
One of these days I'll get it right.
So, Sarah, thank you so much for being on the panel today. I know you serve as our general counsel and help keep all of us in line when we decide how far we want to take something. So, if you don't mind, please share with us. I know we've heard a lot today about some federal regulatory things that are happening, but we're definitely hearing a lot about funding right now. So if you could maybe give an update on what is happening with our cabinet and with the federal funding program and where things stand.
Sure, I'm happy to. It's great to be with you all today. As Kari mentioned, I'm Sarah Noble, and I am the General Counsel and Executive Director of the Office of Legal Services. We are basically a mid-sized law firm within the cabinet. I have the privilege of working with 30 attorneys and support staff to defend all the actions that these individuals and their programs take to make sure that our regulations and our statutes are enforced, and to defend the cabinet when those are challenged. I think currently we have about 1,200 cases at the Office of Administrative Hearings, and we also have cases in circuit court. To your question though, Kari, something that has really taken a lot of our attention in recent months are challenges that we have undertaken to the loss of federal funding. Kenya talked about the state energy program, and we currently have litigation in district court that Governor Beshear brought basically on behalf of the cabinet to secure funding in that area. We also just last week joined a group of 21 states to file a challenge to the termination of Solar for All funding, and that's pending before the Court of Federal Claims. Those are really important efforts because it's not just about our cabinet, it's not just about our programs, but it's really about the Kentuckians who stand to benefit from those programs, whether it be through more energy resilient housing or through jobs that are created by our energy programming. Part of our job in OLS, Office of Legal Services, is to make sure that our efforts as a cabinet to benefit Kentuckians are protected. And in recent months, we have had to do more of that, perhaps, than usual. There's never a dull moment in the Office of Legal Services, and we just strive to do all we can to ensure that those very important programs of the cabinet are able to continue.
Well, I know we only have a few minutes left, so I'd like to just maybe do it quick. If anybody wants to have a final thought, and if there's any questions in the audience, we can go through any of the questions they may have. But Sarah, I'll leave it up to you. Do you have any final thoughts to share with the audience today?
Not really final thoughts, but maybe an expansion of what I already said. We also have litigation pending and challenges pending regarding federal decisions that have been made by the EPA with regard to, for example, redesignation of the Louisville area to attainment in terms of ozone. Also, we have a current challenge pending regarding, just went right out of my head. Tony, it's in your shot. RFG, removing Louisville from reformulated gas
Was that
program.
telepathic? I think?
It was. Were you saying it? That's how well we work together. But we take a lot of steps, because we take our jobs very seriously, to do whatever we can legally to remove barriers and to increase our ability to do the good work that all of these folks do within the state.
Anybody else?
I always have something to say. Not the final word, but I will say what I've noticed that has been a great success for us is really our partnerships that Energy has within our agency. The PSC is an example. We've been a part of the cooperative streamlining work group. We're a part of a nuclear work group. I think having a non-regulatory office be in partnership with a regulatory agency has been very powerful in terms of being able to talk about complex issues. We have a great partnership with the Division of Water on the Energy Water Nexus and doing energy audits. We're also installing transfer switches at our water infrastructure so that they can accept backup power. I have a great relationship with nature preserves. I never thought Energy would have a relationship with nature preserves, but Zach and I are working out ways that energy projects can get really good access to biological assessment data, and so that we can make informed decisions when we have sensitive species in an area. We've always had a great relationship with Tony's shop, Michael Kennedy on the air side. We talk energy all the time, water and waste as well. And Courtney and I, don't even get us started. And when we start talking about energy and reclaimed lands and what we did with site suitability on our mine sites. So I think for me, it's really showing the strength of how energy really partners within our agencies and how that can benefit the citizens and the regulatory community.
Yeah, I totally agree. I know we email back and forth on economic projects a lot, so I think that's the benefit of this entire cabinet, is that it's not siloed. We have an open door policy of, if we have questions, we're willing to work with one another, and we've been pretty successful at it. So, well, either I'm not operating the iPad correctly, or there's no questions. So just real quick, are there any questions out in the audience? All right. Well, thank you all for joining us today, and it's been a pleasure, and we appreciate all the updates you shared with us. Thank you so much.